For the past few weeks, all eyes have been on the tropics as brewing storms threatened our area.
But none so far this year have had the impact on Hampton Roads and the Outer Banks as Hurricane Matthew. Tonight we begin our week-long special series. 10 on your side's Brandy Cummings looks back at the lessons learned and what has changed since last year, Brandy.
It was a Cat 5 that began its destructive path in late September. Hurricane Matthew is responsible for killing nearly 600, making it the deadliest Atlantic hurricane since 2005. From Chesterfield
It was a bit of a surprise
to Hatteras Island.
I don't think any of us were prepared for the amount of damage.
And Virginia Beach.
This was something very, very unusual.
No one we spoke to believed at the time the storm would have had the impact it did.
We ended up with a disaster. Obviously, it was catastrophic.
Wavy Chief Meteorologist Don Slater says at least 3 different models predicted the storm away from our area.
It was supposed to go out once it hit Myrtle Beach. Didn't happen.
But around the first week of October, things changed.
Hurricane forecast models are in the 90th percentile in terms of accuracy. This one was way off, and it soon became very, very apparent.
It was a perfect storm for disaster, literally. With the ground already saturated from 2 previous storms, high tide, and rain pouring from Matthew, the unexpected water simply had nowhere to go. A view from Chopper 10 shows the widespread flooding that took days to recede. Our statistics, compiled over several months, show the extent of the damage by the numbers. Thousands of homes impacted, millions of dollars in damage.
My first day was the day after Matthew hit.
Ed Porner leads the Recovery and Resilience Department for the State Emergency Management. He surveyed the damage from a helicopter with Governor McAuliffe.
It was evident that something big had happened.
Porner says VDIM was prepared for the storm at the start, and because of Matthew's projected path, some storm centers had begun to shut down. But overnight, flooding reports emerged. They quickly knew things weren't what was expected.
You get to a mindset where you're like, okay, this is terrible, but now what kind of action items are we going to get out there to be able to make sure we address those people that are suffering?
VDIM has spent the last year working with cities, helping them get back to the new normal. But a lot has changed on the state level since Matthew.
We've taken a new approach to the way we do business.
VDIM is working on a statewide recovery plan. Additionally, 30% of its force is now out in the localities to be able to more quickly respond in the event of a hurricane.
We're being much more proactive when it comes to leaning into these types of storms.
We already see part of that readiness plan. Earlier this year, the state unveiled a new tiered hurricane evacuation system.
That's going to give us a much more comprehensive ability to issue instructions across the entire region.
As the state prepares for the next storm, we found many people still recovering from Matthew 1 year later. VDIM estimates a reported 100 homes across Hampton Roads still need repair.
So we're still dealing with it a year later.
A process that could take years to complete. But the biggest lesson about Mother Nature's fury and Hurricane Matthew perhaps came in the way this storm was predicted.
So the lesson learned from Matthew is certainly to focus on the possibility that any community here in Hampton Roads can be impacted, and flooding can really significantly have a lasting impact on a community that's not used to seeing the coastal flooding normally associated with a hurricane.
There's no salvaging it.
A look
The rugs were, wet,
inside this house
and you can see the mold.
in the Windsor Woods neighborhood.
The cabinets were soaked with water.
1 year after Hurricane Matthew
The doors, they all rotted out at the bottom.
reveals a sad reality.
It was devastating.
Ron Huff is still working to fix his mother's home of 50 years after floodwaters destroyed much of what was inside. Roberta Huff, Bobby as she's called, saw what she owned outside for the first time during our interview.
Oh my God, there's our hot tub! And that's all the carpeting.
Hurricane Matthew took an unexpected turn last year, dumping water on areas already saturated from 2 previous storms. Bobby told me rainwater had reached the porch before, but never made it inside.
So this was something very, very unusual.
More than 10 miles away, unusually high water also flooded properties in the Asheville Park neighborhood. This cell phone video shows the view outside of Charles Young's home.
It kept rising and rising, and then it got to about 11 inches about 3 hours into the storm.
His garage garage was flooded, but he considers himself lucky because no water made it inside.
When it started flooding, it was very nerve-wracking.
Houses and apartments like at Waypoint were destroyed after the storm. According to Virginia Beach estimates, 2,200 homes were damaged, 1,500 of those by flooding.
Matthew was a bad storm. A tropical storm that turns into a nor'easter tends to be a much worse storm for us.
Based on a breakdown by city from the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, Virginia Beach was awarded more than $8.5 million in grant money after Matthew. More than $55 million in award money was dedicated to help citizens recover. But the extensive flooding revealed another reality.
At the end of the day, it's all drainage. And that's the biggest challenge in our city.
Because of Matthew's impact, City Council voted to dedicate $316 million to focus on projects in areas that flooded most. Work will span up to 15 years in places across the city, including Windsor Woods, where the Huffs are trying to rebuild.
I wouldn't like anyone else to experience that.
Emergency Management Director Aaron Sutton told me for the first time during Hurricane Matthew, the city used a new damage assessment program. It's based on mobile technology that allowed them to report damage to the state faster.
So that's a huge improvement for us.
Sutton explained there were many lessons learned through Matthew. Her office identified protocols and procedures that needed revising. The city has now purchased high water vehicles. They also now have agreements in place for volunteer organizations who may want to help in a disaster.
This was the first time that we had volunteer groups come in and say, we're here to help.
Virginia Beach is also building plans with the military in case of disaster when service members are deployed.
So that was a big one for our community, something that not other communities don't have to deal with.
All of it to be prepared in case we ever see this again. Millions watched the unexpected storm pound Hampton roads in northeast North Carolina in October 2016. The dangerous downpour saturated areas already trying to dry out from two previous storms, Hurricane Hermine and Tropical Storm Julia. When the rain from Hurricane Matthew stopped, the water remained for several days inside homes.
It was unbelievable.
And businesses.
We were in a perfect spot where water would come in from the front and the back.
Lost everything.
Pictures from inside this convenience store on Suffolk's Main Street showed the height of the water inside. Nearly everything, including the gas pumps, were destroyed.
I lost whole inventory.
Pritesh Patel has owned the store 5 years. Because of the extent of the damage, he applied for and was granted a $307,000 loan from the Small Business Administration. 10 on Your Side worked for weeks to get these statistics showing just how much money the agency granted businesses in our area after Hurricane Matthew, a total loan amount of more than $2 million.
We sort of knew it was coming, but didn't expect it was going to be as bad as it was.
Max Greenhood owns Rocket Bike, a marketing agency in downtown Portsmouth. He and his wife were out of town when water filled their office.
And I remoted into my computer from my phone and was looking through the computer's camera to see like water going by in the office.
They had to replace $25,000 worth of fixtures and equipment. An SBA loan has helped, but this isn't the first time water has impacted their business. We found this video in the Wavy archive from September 2014.
Since we moved in 2 weeks ago, yeah, it's a nice housewarming gift from Mother Nature.
Yeah, you heard that right. 2 weeks after they moved into the first location, flash flooding sent water in. And last year, during Hurricane Matthew, more water damage at the same office. The company has now relocated a few doors down.
But luckily, we're a little bit higher up and don't have as much of the flooding issues as the other property.
Back in Suffolk, remnants of Matthew remain inside the store.
4.5 feet. So all these underwater.
Patel has lifted the registers, hoping to protect them if there's ever another flood. But there is still more work to be done. He's restocking shelves slowly and admits he'll be glued to the TV, especially during hurricane season, which doesn't end for another 2 months.
You hear the wind switch, and all of a sudden you knew it was coming.
Howling wind, torrential downpours, a massive storm surge. Hurricane Matthew is a storm that won't soon be forgotten because of its uncertain path.
By the time we got those predictions, evacuations couldn't take place any longer because we were already seeing the impacts of the storm.
And its long-lasting impacts.
It was overwhelming. It took me a while to even process what was going on.
Inside the newly opened Dare County Emergency Operations Center, Emergency Management Director Drew Pearson showed us the storm's historic path.
Hurricane Matthew was a storm that changed a lot.
In addition to the damage to homes and businesses in the Outer Banks, 125 yards of NC-12 suffered overwash. 25 people reportedly died across North Carolina. And although the state requested more than $900 million in federal aid, it was only granted 1% of it. Pearson explained an inoperable emergency alert notification system in Dare County made communication difficult.
If it had been, we probably could have done a better job of getting that changing information to the citizens that were going to be impacted.
Kevin and Ashley Jackson showed us how water destroyed their home on Hatteras Island. This is no lake. Kevin took this video from his front porch.
To know that we were going to have to start all over and not really knowing how we were going to do that was difficult.
Pictures taken after the water receded show the extent of the damage.
Well, we lost all of our furniture. So we lost all of our couches and chairs. Everything in the kitchen went. We lost most of our pots and pans and dishes, things like that.
Thankfully, Ashley followed her gut to move the pictures and important documents ahead of the storm. That's all safe now, but photos only tell part of their story. The young family has been out of their home 10 months.
Everything that we owned in the front yard.
With the insurance payout, a grant, and a loan, it has already cost the Jacksons $190,000 to rebuild, a cost that may continue to add up because their home is still incomplete.
We had bad go around with the contractor and lost a lot of money.
Since Matthew, the Jackson home has been lifted 12.5 feet in the air, hopefully to prevent this from ever happening again. A similar move to many homes on their street.
They got water and ended up redoing their house.
There are many lessons to be learned from Matthew. Ashley told me if there's ever another storm headed her way, she'll leave again. And
I would make sure that our insurance policies I know exactly the details of them. I know who to call. I would make sure I've got those numbers on hand.
But the most important message could apply to us all.
Whether it's here in Dare County, the Tidewater area, or anywhere in our nation, every hurricane season, our citizens and our visitors need to be ready.
We've been rebuilding a piece at a time for over a year now.
We first met Robert Anderson last year, not long after the storm. He gave us a look inside his home then. Now, a year later, much of the work still isn't complete.
I still got to put in the flooring. My garage, I still don't even have the walls up in my garage.
Anderson says he got $8,000 from FEMA to help, but without flood insurance, it'll cost thousands more to completely fix his home.
I work hard, but, you know, I got bills, I got mortgage, I got car payments, all of that stuff. So it's just whatever extra I have goes and buys the next piece of sheetrock.
10 on Your Side was there in 2016 when the city of Chesapeake voted to give money to residents with extensive damage. But that's $2,000 Anderson says he never got.
The city said that they didn't get our application.
Angela Wilson lives one street over. Her home was also severely flooded. She too said she never got financial help from the city.
It was mildew from the carpet being down, so everything was wet. The refrigerator was turned upside down on the floor.
The Wilsons are a military family and were renting their home out while they lived in Florida. 10 on Your Side did some digging and found out that may have been why they didn't get the $2,000 from the city. It was designated for people living in damaged homes when Matthew hit. Now, a year later, they're still working to make repairs.
We're just trying to do it piece by piece.
To further complicate their recovery, the Wilsons had a bad experience with a contractor.
They did some work, but when we called back and the invoices, when we paid them, they never contacted us back.
And get this, they canceled their flood insurance just 2 months before the storm. This mother doesn't even have a kitchen to cook for her children.
You just got to pick it up and just move forward and try to get it done.
The city of Chesapeake estimates damage to homes is more than $13 million. Of those who had losses, 80% were without flood insurance. Many of them weren't in a designated flood zone. The city response after the storm was unprecedented.
For us, it was a big operation on pumping out neighborhoods, some new issues that we had never really encountered before in such a historic rain event.
The city also realized through Matthew there weren't enough pumps. They're now looking to purchase more. Another lesson in the storm was the use of social media and the need to better integrate it into the emergency response.
We were interacting with citizens through social media from a response standpoint, but also through a recovery standpoint.
Not if, but when another storm comes our way, this is what people who experience the wrath of Matthew want you to know.
You need to make a preparedness plan.
Have flood insurance. even if you think you don't need it.
Really pay attention to what your homeowner's insurance will take care of.
You can watch all of this week's coverage on the impact of Hurricane Matthew right now on wavy.com. I'm Brandy Cummings, 10 on your side.